It's finally landed. We've got our first balance patch for Helldivers 2, and I've been spending some time today getting to grips with the changes on a surface level so I can get the information and my thoughts out to you. I'll be spending more time investigating the finer details, and I'll also get these out to you as soon as possible. But with that being said, let's get into it. So I'm going to go through the patch notes point at a time, and I'm not going to go through all the fixes. I'm actually going to go through all the headline points that I think are the most interesting gameplay changes. First of all, one of the major updates is we now have Planetary Hazards active. Many planets have now got additional environmental challenges that will appear at random while you are deployed, from fire tornadoes to meteor showers and many more. Now, I've experienced a couple of these meteor showers and they were pretty spicy, if I'm honest, taking me and my squad out instantly. It felt like nature's version of an orbital barrage. I think on first glance you need to look up and run to the edge of the area that's being affected, much like if you're trying to avoid a 120 or a 380. I haven't experienced a fire tornado yet, but if they're anywhere near as lethal as meteor showers, we're in for a rough time, Helldivers. I like it. I think it's cool, and I love that they're adding new variations to the moment-to-moment gameplay. An excellent addition in my opinion. A user on Reddit kindly posted what they'd seen on the planetary map. I am not going to try and say all these planet names for you because I've actually just butchered half of them and it'll take me a lifetime to get through them anyway. But what we seem to have are, on top of the fire tornadoes and meteor showers, we also have ion storms, sandstorms, blizzards, volcanic activity and tremors. So quite a wide range of things to experience there, which is really interesting stuff. Moving on, balancing changes. This is the nitty-gritty of the patch. Eradicate missions now will require more kills and enemies will spawn more often. The time to complete these missions was previously shorter than intended and should now take twice as long to complete. I'll be honest, yes, I'm glad they've implemented this change. I know that these missions were being used to kind of grind experience quickly, but one thing, I just don't like these missions, folks. I think they're really boring, but I'm glad that they've made them a little bit more intense by the sounds of it. I haven't yet had a chance to play them, so my boring statement might not be true anymore, but let's just wait and see and find out. Now, the meat and bones of the patch, the rebalancing of some fan favorite weapons. This has been causing great commotion in the community so far, so let's take a look. A quick breakdown of all the changes here. We have the SG225 breaker now having decreased capacity in the mag from 16 to 13 with an increased recoil from 30 to 55, so that is a nerf. The SG8 Punisher, on the other hand, is buffed. Increased total ammo capacity from 40 to 60. Increased stagger force, very interesting. Increased damage from 40 to 45 per bullet. Definitely a buff there. The SG225 SP Breaker Spray and Pray. Increased armor penetration, increased fire rate from 300 to 330, increased pellets from 12 to 16 per shot, that was absolutely needed, decreased mag size from 32 to 26, that is absolutely a buff. The Railgun, I take a large inhale before I say this. Decreased armor penetration in safe mode, decreased damage against durable enemy parts. This is a nerf. I've been using it today and I'm going to go into detail in a moment. It is really big. You can really feel it, folks. The Flam 40 flamethrower, increased damage per second by 50%. What a large buff. I've been really wanting to use this thing. It just hasn't felt viable, so I'm really excited about this one. And finally, the LAS-98 laser cannon, increased damage against durable enemy parts, increased armor penetration, improved ergonomics, another buff. I'm going to be deep diving into these changes over the coming days, so just drop the channel a subscribe if you're looking to stay informed, folks, and it really helps me out. Thank you. So let's deep dive into these changes a little bit more. So first and foremost, the breaker nerf. Now, I was really surprised to see this, in fairness, and actually I was really surprised, in fairness, to see nerfs. I was really expecting it to be the other way around. I was expecting it to be a lot more weapons being buffed to bring them in line with things like the Railgun and things like the breaker. but that is not the approach the devs have taken, and I think this might be where some of the frustration is coming from. They've dropped the magazine capacity from 16 to 13 and increased the recoil, and I've done a quick basic number crunch, and I want to emphasize that this is quick, so I apologize if these aren't absolutely correct. But the potential damage output changes I think a full magazine on the old version had the ability to do was around 5,280 if you were to hit every shot. The nerfed version, on the other hand, is around 4,290, so by my shoddy maths, that's around a 1k damage decrease. That's absolutely massive. Having played around with it a bit, it still packs a punch, but it certainly doesn't have that sustained output that it used to have, and you can really feel it, folks. So now it makes sense to look at the Breaker Spray and Pray, with its increased ammo capacity from 40 to 60, a faster fire rate, increased pellet amounts of 12 to 16, and a decreased mag size from 32 to 26. It feels a hell of a lot more viable than it did previously. The increased damage equates to just under 400 extra damage per magazine, I believe. I've been using this a bit again today, and I quite like it. It's certainly not on the same level of shred that the Breaker was, but it certainly works a lot better than it did. One thing that I did notice that was quite interesting was the way in which it can tear through charges' weak back spots if you get a clear shot, which might be something of particular interest. The increased armor penetration makes it a little bit more viable against those sort of middling enemies as well. Next up, the Punisher, and this is very interesting. It now has a substantial increase in damage output, going from around 5,760 to 6,480 per full mag. Perhaps what's even more interesting here though, folks, is that it can now heavily stagger enemies with each shot, making it very useful for crowd control. It appears to get a lot more one-shots off and rewards a more accurate approach to gunplay, which I actually quite enjoy. Being a Jar 5 Dominator user mainly, I like having to make my shots mean something, so that's quite interesting. Having used it for a while today, I feel like this is probably one of the more interesting changes, and I think I might find myself investigating how I can incorporate this into my loadouts more often. Now the headliner. Brace yourselves, the king is dead. The Railgun has been substantially nerfed in this balance patch, and it certainly caused some polarizing opinions within the community. I'm really surprised they've taken this approach, and having tested the Railgun this morning, I can understand some of the frustration out there regarding how poorly it performs now against things like Chargers and Bile Titans. It no longer rips leg armor off with these, and I've had some instances today when I've put 3 or 4 fully charged shots into the same leg, and it's felt like the Charger's still almost at full health. It must be used in unsafe mode now to get any value out of it, so this further creeps into the risk-reward style of play. I do understand the thoughts on the other side of the camp, though, that this was a vastly overperforming weapon that needed to be brought in line. The initial response from the community seems to be that there's nothing to handle larger armored enemies efficiently now. I was running T7 to test, and it does feel markedly more challenging now to play at that difficulty. Perhaps this is the intention of the devs, though. This is what they want to do. They want to make the game feel a bit harder. One thing is for sure, it's certainly going to have people searching for the next best thing here, and is going to force us towards things like the recoilless, the autocannon, and the expendable anti-tank. I don't necessarily think that this is a bad thing, but it does beg the question, what are our alternatives that are going to be efficient, folks? The flamethrower. This has had a large buff, a huge 50% per second damage increase. This one's got me really interested, and I'm looking forward to trying to use this more often in my horde clear duties. I think there is potential to use this in a horde clear setup much more than ever now, and I'll be interested to see how it performs with the armor changes we're going to talk about in a moment. The las cannon has been given a much needed buff. You can move more whilst using it, and it absolutely shreds through medium-sized enemies, rewarding slicing off limbs and other bits and pieces. With that being said, I still feel like it could be pushed further. It'd be great if it did a bit more damage to armored targets like Chargers, but with that being said, I haven't had a chance to experiment enough with it to give a final verdict. These are just my first impressions. Onto stratagems. The shield generator packs had an increased delay before recharging. As someone who rarely uses the shield pack, I don't really have much of an opinion on this one, folks. Other than that, I know a lot of people were using it, so it's likely to encourage other choices here. What are your thoughts here, folks? Sound off in the comments below. The orbital barrages are so much better now after this patch. they've increased the duration and decreased the spread. This makes them more predictable and a hell of a lot more punchy when dealing with nests, automaton bases, breaches, and other tightly focused packs of enemies. This makes barrages much more viable now, and a very welcome addition to our stratagem arsenal. I actually think I'll be inclined to try these a bit more now with these changes, which is absolutely great. Armor values are now working as intended, and this has been a hugely anticipated change. This, in a nutshell, gives us more survivability with movement penalties the higher up we go. Interestingly, there are reports in the community that whilst heavy armor wasn't working as intended, neither was light armor. So whilst heavy armor now allows us to sustain more damage from enemies, light armor now sustains even less. And I've seen reports of people saying they're getting two-shotted by scavengers. I haven't tested that yet, but that is quite a scary thought. Now, I was extremely excited to try heavy armor, but if I'm honest, my first impressions, it doesn't really feel worth sustaining a few extra hits for the huge speed decrease taken. I wonder if they need to be a little bit more forgiving with the speed mechanics in general in the game, just to make it feel a little bit less punishing, because I do think that's how it feels when you wear heavy armor still. These are the main headlines of the patch. If you want to check the full notes and all the fixes in there, I've put a link in the description below. What do you think about these patch notes, folks? Are you frustrated with the nerfs, or do you have an opinion on this and think that actually it's good for the long-term health of the game? Sound off in the comments below. Take care of yourselves, keep having fun, and I'll see you in the next one.